We now come to my hero Galilei, and he has the first and last name. His name was like John. So Galileo, and son of Galileo. So Galileo Galilei is his name. And he was an Italian. He lived near Venice, and Venice was a port city and rich. Now at that time there was no king of Italy. Every little city was their own kingdom, and so you had dukes of all of these different places. Now he was of course very smart, and he loved tinkering with things. He is the guy who came up with the idea that of inertia, which becomes the first law of Newton, which objects in motion stay in motion, objects at rest stay in rest unless acted upon by another force. That's his idea. Newton just completely lifted it, and everybody knew that it was Galileo's, but Newton put it into his laws of this is the way the universe works. So Galileo studied all kinds of different things, and in his study wrote. One of the things he's known for in terms of astronomy is that he invented the telescope, which is so not true. He did not invent the telescope. Let me tell you the story. So evidently he read a report or heard a rumor, okay, that a guy in the northwest, I don't know, Holland area, Belgium area, had invented a telescope, and that he used convex lenses, two convex lenses in a tube, a leather tube, and that you could see far away, okay? So that's all he needed. He said, okay, somebody has invented something that can see far away with two convex lenses. So he just said, I'm going to make one. He had never seen one. No one had ever seen one. He only heard a rumor that it had existed somewhere, okay? So Venice was a place where glass was made all the time. It was one of the best centers for glass in the whole world. And so he went and ordered two lenses. Now he told the glass makers exactly what to do. And remember, convex are bumped out on both sides, just like eyeglasses would be. Okay, and he had a small one and a big one, and he put it in a leather tube, and he played with it so that you could move the tube, and invented within just a couple weeks, because he was afraid that somebody else was going to come with this telescope because he had an idea. If you are the Duke of Venice and you're so worried that someone's going to attack your city from the sea, okay, because that's what you would do, that you would come and bring in a navy and you would conquer the city. If you were worried about that, you would want to be able to see a ship coming far away as fast as you could. So Galileo got the town fathers up in one of the towers in Venice, and he said, if I could let you have 1 hour notice when a ship is coming over the horizon, would you pay me a lot of money? And they said, absolutely. If we could have 1 more hour of notice that a ship was coming, yes, we would pay you a lot of money. And so he pulls out his telescope and he said, look through this telescope. And as they looked, they could see a ship farther away than they could see with their eyes. Well, he's instantly rich. He now lives, basically doesn't work. He just has plenty of money in the bank, and he just goes and puts himself into his full-time research. Now, he has a problem, because the more he studies and the more that he reads, the more he realizes that the Earth is not the center of the solar system and that the Earth is not stationary. Everything is making him believe that Copernicus, that he read Copernicus's book, was right, and that there's the heavenly bodies that are moving includes the Earth that's moving as one of the planets. But it's a very dangerous time to have your own ideas about this. And he was in the middle of the head of Roman Catholicism, which was Italy. So he wrote some things and agreed with Copernicus. Okay, now Copernicus was, no one liked him in the upper-ups. The people did not like the idea that the Earth was not stationary in the center of the universe. And so they brought Galileo to the Inquisition. And by this time he was an old man. He was well known. They were going to burn all of his books. They were going to burn him at the stake. And they basically said, take it back. you don't believe that the Earth is not stationary, and you don't believe that the Earth is the center of the solar system. And he basically, to save his skin, said, oh, I'm sorry, I was stupid. The Earth is not moving. Of course it's not moving. I don't know what I was thinking. I must have been asleep. And the Earth is not the center of the solar system. So he recanted and lived in house arrest in his villa for the rest of his life. A lot of people that did say Copernicus was right paid for it with their life. Copernicus, remember, wrote his book on his deathbed, but Galileo didn't want to put up with it, and so he recanted. But of course, everyone realized that what he had written was what he had written, and that he believed just because he signed the paper that the Inquisition given him didn't mean anything, and most people would have recognized that. So this is Galileo's telescope, and it's still in the museum near Venice. And in his notebook, he was the first to look at the moons of Jupiter. He was able to see moons through his telescope. He was also able to do the first drawings of the moon and all of the pock marks on the moon from the impact craters that are on the moon. And he was the first to see these planets that no one else had seen. Now, people with their just naked eye could see Jupiter, but he could not see the planets in front of Jupiter. And he also said these planets are not going around the Earth. These planets are going around the planet. So these are moons of Jupiter going around Jupiter, just like our moon goes around Earth. So, and it was data that anybody that looked through the telescope could see. So he said it, he wrote it, he published it. He didn't say again what he was in trouble for, but this is enough to get you in the history books. But Galileo has done 10 million things to get you in the history books. It was his telescope that made him think that Copernicus was right. So if you look at Venus, you're going to see that Venus sometimes is a full disk, sometimes is a dark disk, sometimes is a crescent disk. And just like the slide I showed you before, if Venus is going around in a circle away from you, then you should only see crescents. And it was this that convinced Galileo that Copernicus was right, even though that he recanted and signed the Inquisition later. This was what he believed. Last on our list is Isaac Newton. And Isaac Newton was at college, and they closed the college because the plague broke out. So they sent everyone home. I think he was 21, maybe 20, and he was home. And so he just came from a small place in Lincolnshire up in the middle of England, and beside his house is an apple orchard, saying that you can still go to his house today. Now, whether or not an apple fell on his head, no one knows. But the story goes that he was sitting there with nothing to do. He was home from school, and he was sitting under an apple tree, and he was looking up through the branches of another apple tree and looking at the moon. The moon was in the sky during the daytime, like you've seen it a million times, and he was looking at the moon. And while he was looking at the moon, an apple from that tree fell to the ground. And the apple caught his attention, and the question in his mind instantly was, why did the apple fall to the ground, but the moon doesn't fall to the ground? Why doesn't the moon act like the apple? Okay, so that was the first question that eventually led him on his work to think about what masses do when they're close to each other. Masses exert a force on each other that is called gravity. And so Isaac Newton was the first not to think about gravity or understand that it happens, that everybody knows you fall down and go boom. But Isaac was the first to put it in math terms and to write it. Now, in order to describe what he was doing, he had to come up with a new mathematics called calculus. He invented calculus in order to describe what he saw in his studies. we're going to see that calculus is ascribed to two different people at the same time. A fella in Germany was coming up with it at the very same time that Isaac came up with it. Isaac had it in a drawer for 25 or 30 years. He just used it because that was helping him to describe how gravity worked. And then he heard a rumor that this other guy was going to publish a book, and he published it first. Okay, so typical ego. He was smart as he could be, but he also knew his place in history, and even during his lifetime, he was revered. Isaac Newton in England was as famous as the king. Okay, so because of what he did. He also opened up the possibility that you could study the universe and know its laws, that you could follow God's mind, that God was okay with it. He was the one who invented it, but men could understand it. And that was a big rubber band that sent science forward as people said, well, we can study anything. If we could study gravity, then we must be able to study anything. And people immediately started studying every imaginable thing in the universe that they could see, not just astronomy, but everything. And they were writing books, and societies were coming together where they would review each other's work and listen to each other's work and ask questions and probe each other. And so the scientific community really was birthed during this time. The other thing that his theory did was other things that were true, including Kepler's laws. Isaac Newton's work on gravity backed it up. So, for instance, if you have a gravitational force which pulls that planet in towards the sun, okay, but yet the planet is moving and has momentum and is going in a certain direction and it wants to go in a straight line, then the gravitational pull will force it off of that straight line and into a curved path. Well, this gravity theory, if you look at it based upon how does Kepler's law work, it makes Kepler's work even stronger. Okay, so what a good theory does is it's not just a theory that works for what you're talking about, but everything that touches it will support it. Okay, so everything that is true, one theory on one subject can reinforce something on another subject. And eventually now, gravity is no longer called a theory, but it's accepted universally by everyone, and it's referred to now as a law.